Hello gamers, Power Heal here, and today we're coming at you with a little bit of a different type of video. So this is going to be kind of like a reaction video to the OnlyFangs raid. We're not going to actually watch the raid because it was like 4 hours or something crazy like that. Maybe we can do some content later where we watch it, but I just kind of want to talk about it for a little bit, and I figured I still need to do my AV stuff for the week on the Rogue, so I'm just kind of waiting to get back in queue. And while I do that, we'll talk about it. And yeah, because I thought there were a couple things that we could kind of like take away from the raid, right? And so I guess like I'll kind of give my impressions on how things went at first, and then I'll talk about like the big takeaway. And so right from the start, I was like watching the healer POVs. They started on Ani, because they wanted to get the buff, the Nixia head, and it was interesting. Basically, like, yeah, the trash went pretty much fine. They actually had a double pull, which seemed kind of sketch, but none of the melee were really attacking, so that was fine. And then they ended up just going into the boss, and I was watching some of the POVs for the boss, and it was a little bit scary. We had Soda Poppin not attacking the boss at one point when it was coming down for phase 3. We had some people just like, not being in range to heal anybody. At one point we had the boss, like, I think almost facing one of the whelp caves. At one point the boss was like directly facing the raid, and there's I think it's like one of the warriors from, it's like one of the speedrunning guilds, I forget, I think, and he's like watching this basically, and he's like shouting for Anixia to like breathe on the raid. It was actually one of the most hilarious things, but she didn't breathe on them. And I think there was a priest like tanking the boss for a good while in the last phase, and like nobody was healing him except himself. So I mean, we can obviously go over some of that stuff and watch some clips and stuff like that. But basically the tone that was set, I think, from kind of like the start there was, I was like, oh wow, like they might actually wipe in Molten Core, because things looked like they were kind of like really bad and like really sketchy. Particularly from like the healer POV, and this is not to flame anybody, obviously a lot of these people have like never played WoW or something like that, so it's totally understandable and completely fine, but it just looked like it could actually be dire. I was like, wow, we might actually just lose this raid, um, on like one of the early bosses even, or maybe even to trash. And yeah, so that was kind of like my thoughts going into it. That was my headspace. And then I was watching with some friends. We were just like chilling. I was doing AV and then watching on the other monitor. And, at first it was like there was a lot of tension because of the Anixia, right? And we're kind of like, okay, like, let's see them get to a boss. Are they going to like actually just die here? And they get to Lucifron. And it kind of like dawned on me. This is the point where it dawned on me that I was like, ultimately the problem with this, not the problem because it was still entertaining, right? But like this game really just is too easy if you do things like the right way. If you do things by the book, you know, this game is very easy, and that's like the first point that I wanted to make. Is that it was such a sobering reminder of like if you do everything by the book and you take like the maximum amount of precautions and you're like, aware and paying attention for the most part, there's just not a lot that could kill you in this raid. Like the first thing that I saw was, I thought was going to happen, is I was really concerned about the mind control situation. I actually even I know somebody that's in the guild, and I was like DMing them a day before, like the mind control macro and stuff like that. And honestly, like they didn't even really need to use it, because what they did is they just had nobody cleave, right? They just single targeted the first ads. I think they actually pulled the ads apart, so they were disincentivized to cleave, and then they just single targeted each of the ads down and they killed the boss, and it was super easy. I don't think that they actually even used shadow protection potions. Some of them maybe had that, but the ads died relatively quick, and they were all like fully buffed essentially. So even if the magic debuff expires on somebody that's fully buffed, it's like what, like 3k damage at most, right? So it's easily tankable. You're going to easily get that person's health up before the next one goes off, and you're going to be able to get a large percentage of those buffs off anyway, right? So yeah, there was that, and then Magmadar obviously went pretty easily. Gehennis was one I thought that, would be a bit more stressful, but they handled it pretty well overall because, again, all their melee or tanks used the free action potion. It seemed like you didn't have anybody get stunned in the Firestorm, and they all had a GFPP, Greater Fire Protection Potion. And that's the second thing that I was thinking, and why I wanted to make a video on this is, I think that Greater Fire Protection Potion is honestly like the best consume in the entire game, potentially, when you really think about it, right? And obviously we kind of take it for granted if we've been playing for a while. Like, I haven't used I think I used one GFPP so far this fresh, and I used some GFPPs in Psalm, actually, but ironically it was one on Rag and then one on Magmadar because the boss functioned a little bit differently in Psalm. But yeah, I basically haven't used like a GFPP in an actual normal MC as a healer, at least, for forever. I'll normally pre-pop a normal fire protection potion just to have it on, right? Because why not? Because those are strong as well. But this raid just made me realize like how strong they were, because basically, like, when you were watching Onyxia Phase 2, right, you were barely seeing people take damage, and that was again from the GFPP, right? Because the fireball, I think you could probably eat like multiple fireballs with a GFPP. You could at least eat like 1.5. You know what I mean? And realistically, she's not going to be up in the air that long anyway. So if you actually have your whole raid GFPP'd, Phase 2 is like basically completely irrelevant unless somebody actually runs into the whelps intentionally and trolls, or I guess she deep breaths. That's always a little bit of RNG, but she didn't deep breath here. And yeah, like every encounter that I thought there was going to be a problem with, right? I realized, you can just do the safe strategy here and you'll be fine. And when there's not a safe strategy, there's a protection potion. And like I said, on Gehennis, those potions, you didn't even really see people's health move that much because the potions were just such a huge factor. They were basically absorbing all the Rain of Fire. And if you pre-pop them, you can actually use a second potion during the fight, which is kind of crazy. And if you compare the potion to like a health potion, I think a health potion is like, what, 1k to 1.7k? And a Greater Fire Protection Potion is, I believe it's at least over 3k. It's something like crazy. I think it can go to 3750 or something like that. And we can actually go to the auction house. Let's see, I have a lesser one on. Okay, yeah, so 1k to 1.7k. So I feel like the other one's going to be into the 3k. We can actually check the auction house just to see. But just an absolute insane consume, right? And I think they use those on Baron as well. They use the Great Arcane Protection on... Oh, it's the same. It'll be the same for this, yeah. So it's basically like 3.3k is like the maximum value you can get out of it. And they use these on Shazara. They basically double potted, I think, so they had a pot going before and they potted during the fight. The fight's just really easy in general, so it died super quick. And then, there wasn't... Golmag, they did the strat where they just pull the dogs away, like, very slowly, very easily. They actually did almost have a death on Golmag, but that was because somebody was, like, unsure of their healing assignment, or, they weren't in the right position to heal that person. But otherwise, it would have been completely fine. And Major Domo, they did the sheep strat. They just did no cleave at all. And if you really have people that are, like, listening, it's very easy to do the content. And it actually made me laugh because I was thinking while it was going on that it's probably easier to do something like Molten Core with a group like that that has actually, like, a lot of them have never done it before than a group that's actually, especially on hardcore actually, than like a normal group, if that would make sense, that you just take out a trade chat. And why? Well, because the incentives are just completely different, right? Like, obviously, people want to stay alive because they invested tons of time into their character. They don't even really know about parsing or what that is, and there's no, people aren't. Parsing is not like a huge thing on hardcore, obviously, because you're just trying to get the content down, and it really does just change everybody's mentality. And it seemed to me like people just listened a lot more, right? In general, in this raid, and that's really all you need is for people to actually listen and to just do things in a very simple simple way, right? Like, I don't think I've ever seen a domo where like an ad didn't get broken, and maybe at one point like an ad got broken. I have to like rewatch the VOD, but like if it did, it was probably due to like something like a thunderclap or something that people wouldn't really think of as AoE. Normally, you just see hunters like multi-shotting, just constantly breaking sheep, so you end up just like healing through stuff, right, and having to kick ads and stuff. So it was kind of impressive just to see like when you have people that literally have no idea what they're doing, right? They're looking to be guided in that situation, so they're more like open to being essentially told how to play the fight, how to play their character, and stuff like that. And there's not really any ego involved, like there would be if you have like a trade chat pug, where some guy is like trying to parse on Major Domo where he has no chance of parsing because he's in a bad pug anyway, but he doesn't care and he wants to do like the maximum amount of damage so he can be on the top of the leaderboard and look like, oh guys, I did max damage on Domo in this pug or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't really have that type of situation. So I think it's mostly like that kind of caught me by surprise, just how easy this game can be when everybody actually pays attention and listens. And then on top of that, it was like the consumes, because even on something like Ragnaros, I was a little bit scared for honestly, because there's just like a lot of ways you can die on Rag. There's like a lot of damage going out. The knock can be interesting because obviously when you get knocked, most of the time you took damage before that, and then on top of that, you're taking fall damage sometimes depending on where you're landing. People can get knocked in the lava and they don't know, where to exit and stuff like that. So there was a lot of potential sketchy points on Rag. And the tanks actually were a spot on Rag where I thought the tanking was going to be a big issue, because there was like a couple of factors, right? It was like, one, I was a little bit concerned about threat. Particularly, I think Soda was main tanking it, but I was really worried if he gets knocked and then Tyler has to take over on threat, because I think Tyler's still completely like full prot. But threat didn't really seem to be that much of an issue. I mean, they did have a couple people pull threat, but I think it was almost exclusively those people's fault. You know what I mean? Like they pulled it kind of early on in the pull. I think it was like Peo and one of the warriors that died pulled threat. So there was some threat issues, but I was also kind of worried about tank damage as well. And again, this is just something I didn't really think about, is that Soda seemed to just go above and beyond, and Tyler probably as well, and they actually had a lot of fire resistance. So they weren't really taking anywhere close to the amount of damage I thought they were going to take when they were doing the run. Usually, like, my tanks on Rag, because obviously people are trying to parse, and my tanks are trying to maximize the amount of threat per second, so they're not really using much FR gear at all, and they get completely blasted on that fight. It's very easy to die as a tank, even if your gear is actually exceptional. Like, even if you have really good Fury Prot tanking gear, if you don't have any fire resist on Rag, you're extremely vulnerable to getting blasted. And, obviously with, like, good healers, it's not really that much of a problem. But I think with, like, inexperienced healers, it would be a big problem, because they're just not anticipating the amount of damage. Especially because the damage on that fight compared with every other fight in the raid, especially when you compare how they're doing other fights in the raid, right, where they're not stressing their healers out by like making people tank multiple ads on Gar and stuff like that, right? It's, for the most part, it was very easy. We're gonna have like one person tank one target. We're just gonna spread things out, and that's basically what they did throughout the entire raid. So I think it was a really good decision to get all that fire resistance gear. And that was just another aspect where I was like, I forgot you could actually prepare this hard if you needed to, And in some ways, I actually think it speaks to how well Classic WoW is designed as a game. and I can do a whole video on that sometime as well. But I like the idea that you can have somebody who's kind of experienced, and you can take an entire group in there who's almost like completely unexperienced, right? It wasn't actually the case. There's like, I think 10 sweats they had in there, but to be honest, even the criteria for somebody being a sweat in that guild is not super high. Like, I think it's just, have you cleared Molten Core before? And you have to realize that a lot of people that clear Molten Core in general, even if they clear it in very successful runs, many of them have no idea what is actually going on in the instance, right? So you can have somebody who's in like a speedrunning guild even, and has cleared Molten Core 50 times, and you know, they understand their narrow role very well, but they don't understand like maybe some of the overarching things that go on in the raid. Like, they don't know who's supposed to be tanking what where. They don't know what mob to face away. You know, they don't know how to adjust boss strategies for guilds that aren't doing speedrunning strats, stuff like that. So there's a lot of like variables that go into a raid like Molten Core, and I don't think any of the people in that OnlyFangs guild were real. Wouldn't really consider any of them super knowledgeable about Classic the game outside of maybe like Amphi, you know. And I'm sure there's potentially some other people that I don't really know about, but there weren't too many people, especially in that raid, that knew a ton. You know, obviously Soda did research, and Soda's played the game before, but he's far from like an expert on this particular game, right? So yeah, I was honestly like, I was pretty impressed, and like I said, I just thought it spoke to the quality of the game itself, that you can take people in there and you can basically tell them what to do, and if everybody basically does that, you can down the content, you know, and that's actually like really cool, I think, and that's probably how it should be for the most part for MMOs. Like, it's tough using the word should in situations like that, right? And obviously I don't have issues with games like retail existing. You know, I played retail for a long time. I think that type of cutting edge, really hard PvE content can be really fun to do. But I think in terms of like a traditional MMO, it's probably better if it's built around that classic WoW style difficulty where the mechanics are relatively simple, but they are punishing. But as long as people kind of like do their job and are paying somewhat attention, you know, you can get through the raid without people performing at like some insane ceiling or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, the floor for success, I think, it is very high. And I also I think I like the idea of being able to augment the difficulty even further with the consumes. Because like I said, the fire protection potions were just carrying so hard. It's almost like you have an extra life bar, right, when you think about it? Because as a healer in my raids, I probably have like 4.5k health, maybe 4k health, and that's without a flask, without a Titan's flask. So if I have a fire protection potion on me, I've essentially doubled my health pool, right? And yeah, that goes a super long way. So yeah, that's basically my thoughts on that in general. And basically it's just that like, this game is really easy, and if you just like listen, then you can have success in this game. So if you're a new player and you're like kind of just about to get into raiding, you've been watching my videos or something like that, and you're kind of like, you know, you're concerned, like, are you gonna mess things up? Are you gonna go into Molten Core and it's gonna be a disaster? It's really not. Like, if you listen to people that are guiding you, especially if you've like watched some of the videos on this channel, so you kind of have an idea of what you're going to be doing healing wise. I just put out a video to talk about how I do all the bosses in MC, and I'll be doing that for each raid. And if you combine those with like just listening to your raid leader and focusing on, you know, not doing the things that will always wipe the raid. I think the biggest things that wipe the raid are over pulling, right? So that's mostly happens on trash. So if you don't know what you're doing pulling wise, don't be near the front of the group. Don't be near the tail of the group. You want to be right in the smack dab in the middle, right? And then you're not going to over pull anything. If you're a shaman, always make sure you're recasting your totems, right? Because that's another big pain point for the pulling. And just focus on things like, you know, the Baron Bomb, stuff like that, stuff that has the potential to like wipe your raid. And as long as you're not, you know, guilty of doing any of those sins or whatever, then you're gonna be just fine in the raid, and you're probably actually gonna be an asset if you just listen to your raid leaders and try and do your job as best as possible. And the other thing is consumes. Do not underestimate the importance of consumes in this game, and they are just like probably the strongest thing in the game, bar none. I think OnlyFangs absolutely proved that, because I can guarantee if they were not allowed to use GFPP, you just saw a lot more deaths. A lot more deaths. I think even in a bunch of the lava pack situations, that was another case that I was super concerned about, and I think that the reason why they only had, like, I think it was Fandy died to lava packs, and I think the only reason why is because she didn't really have a GFPP on at that point, and I think if everybody had a GFPP on at all times, nobody dies to lava packs, because the potions are just that powerful, right? And the same thing kind of goes with like mana potions and dark runes, really. You know, being able to restore that much mana mid-pull, especially if you use both of them, is just absolutely huge. And it's really good, too, if you're not speedrunning. Because, like, a lot of times during a speedrun, what will happen is you will just be chain popping mana potions and dark runes. So it's almost like, you know, you're not using them at a clutch time or anything like that. You're just using them to refill your mana. But if you're normally remaxing your mana throughout the raid, and then you get an additional like 2 to 3k mana during the crunch times when you really need it, because most of the time you're going to have good mana, right? Because you're drinking in between each pull when you're doing a normal run. And then, you know, when you do get into those bad situations where you actually run low on mana, if you have those 2 cooldowns available to you, the mana potion and the dark rune, it just makes such a difference in terms of how much you're able to heal in those situations. And most of the time, you only need that little bit of extra buffer to get you over the hump anyway, right? And those consumes are perfect for that. So, yeah, just that's another thing I would recommend to new players if you're just, you know, if you're worried, you're intimidated about, like, and you're trying to think, like, what can I do better? How can I be the best possible in this raid? Just try and consume to the best of your ability, you know? And that's going to make a huge difference in the raid. And if everybody plays like that, the raid is just going to go so smoothly, you know? Yeah. And one final note about the potions, just because, like, they're obviously kind of expensive, especially on Night Slayer right now. I think they're, like, 7-8 gold a piece for the GFPPs. So it's probably going to be difficult for you to invest the same amount into potions as OnlyFangs did. However, you know, you can use the normal fire protection potions as well. Like, obviously these aren't quite as good, but just having an extra 1k to 1.7k buffer health is huge. You know what I mean? There's, nobody could really argue against that, and obviously it's just better to have the other one, but if you can't afford it, pick up some of these. They're like 1 gold a piece, and they'll do you a ton of good. These will keep you alive on Rag even. They'll keep you alive on lava packs for sure, and having something's better than nothing. So yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say, is I thought it was an interesting, you know, it was definitely an interesting experience to watch, and it was fun to watch, and yeah, it just made me think that the game really is easy. Just follow directions, use consumes, and you'll be okay. GFPP is the GOAT. GFPP and Flask of the Titans. The saviors of OnlyFangs, right? But yeah, so thank you guys for watching, and we'll get back to normal content. We might do some reacts to OnlyFangs POVs from the raid, or if they do more raids in the future, we might do some more of those too. And we'll keep doing some of the hardcore reacts as well, if we can find good clips where, you know, where there's something to be gained from them. And we'll keep doing the normal content as well. There's gonna be some druid content on the horizon, so if you got any druids that watch the channel, or if you're thinking of making a druid, you'll probably be pretty happy about that. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will talk to you guys next time.